It's time to wake up. It's time to wake up. It's time to wake up. It's time to wake up.
I'm going to be talking about all those founders and the thousands of other founders out there that are working on climate solutions. Through our work at Net Zero Insights, we're mapping the climate tech funding landscape, and I'm going to be kind of going through some of the insights and trends that we're seeing in the market. So first, what is climate tech? We're at the GREENTECH Festival. There's clean tech. So I just want to make sure that we're all on the same with the definition. For us, climate tech is any innovative product, service, or technology that addresses one of the 6 objectives of the EU taxonomy for sustainable objectives. It's much more than just mitigation. It's adaptation, it's circular economy, and biodiversity. Of course, the focus is on net zero and mitigation. We have to do that, but we also have to keep in mind all of the other solutions and problems that are out there. So to start, Net Zero Insights does research. We do quarterly and yearly reports on the state of climate tech. And so I'm going to start with a snapshot of 2023, and then we're going to dive into what we're seeing this year so far. So from 2019 up until 2022, we really saw this accelerated increase in funding going to climate tech solutions. This is VC and private equity funding for startups and SMEs. And we saw this really great increase happening. But then in 2022, the world hit an economic downturn, and it finally caught up to climate tech. And in 2023, we saw the first decline out there. But it's not all doom and gloom. What we did see is that the climate tech is transitioning to a more diverse capital stack. What that means is more and more non-dilutive funding is going to climate solutions, and this is a great sign of maturity for the market, because what that means is banks and governments are starting to enter and fund these solutions. And so we're seeing that these technologies are maturing, and banks and governments come into these later stage deals. And so in 2023, we really saw a large increase. A lot of this is driven by the IRA in the US, but banks and other large financial institutions are starting to pay attention to climate solutions. That being said, when we are in a down market, everybody's a little bit more hesitant with their money, and investors across the board were making less deals. They really kind of started playing this wait-and-see game. How is the market going to change? And what that meant for founders and startups is that they had to extend their runway, and that founders are now taking longer and longer to raise. They're slowing down hiring, and they're really trying to extend their runway as long as possible until maybe the market shifts again and investors are willing to start deploying more capital. And so we saw across all stages of startups that it's taking longer for founders to raise, especially at the later stage. And that's when we need the real money coming in and to scale these solutions. Another issue, which is kind of tied to those last 2 things, is that when startups are fundraising, they really have to have an exit strategy. And we've seen that IPOs really have, they're not happening anymore. The startups are not being able, or not strategizing to go public. We saw this big increase in 2020 and 2021, but there was a lot of SPACs and companies going public that haven't done so well. And so now when startups are strategizing, IPOs are no longer an exciting exit opportunity. That being said, what we are seeing is that there's been a kind of surge of M&A, mergers and acquisitions happening, and in 2023, they hit an all-time high. This is largely driven by the large corporations acquiring startups, and that's been the core way that startups are exiting and investors are getting their returns. So here, again, we see that corporates are the pace setters within acquisitions. Year over year, they're leading the way. Now, let's look at this year. What are we seeing? Is it the same trends of 2023, or are things changing for this year? And to start, we actually saw a really great first quarter of funding going into climate tech solutions. It was one of the highest recorded total funding that we ever tracked. But it's important to note that this was really shaped by outlier giga rounds. Giga rounds are 1 billion plus rounds going to one startup. And you can see that over 54% of total funding was from just 5 giga rounds. And so you also see that there's like the downward trend in total number of deals. So it's still a tough market for founders. The good thing is the mature technologies are maturing, and the ones that are getting there, like Northvolt, like H2 Green Steel, they're scaling and they're getting the funding needed to really have this mass acceleration of technology adoption. Diving into what those giga rounds look like I said, this is where commercial banks, investment banks, insurance companies, and even infrastructure investors are coming in and starting to support these companies. Across those 5 giga rounds, we saw that the main, that's what we call challenge area, was in energy, in transport, and then energy and industry. And most of this money is going towards capacity expansion and facility construction. So this is batteries and green steel, and huge kind of manufacturing facilities are being created with this money. Another great thing that we're seeing in this quarter and the start of this year is that across all stages, the number of deals is increasing. So investors are back in action and allocating their money across all the stages. And so that's a good sign for any founders out there. Again, one key highlight that we're seeing is that more and more non-dilutive funding is going to founders. And so to all founders that are kind of strategizing for their growth, non-dilutive funding has now become a key component of that. Governments are now allocating billions in grant funding, and banks are now coming in with non-dilutive funding. And so this was the first quarter ever that we saw over 50% of total funding coming from non-dilutive sources. Diving into kind of where this is happening, because I think policy and kind of government really plays a big part in the non-dilutive funding. And so we saw that Sweden actually really led the way in the first part of this year in non-dilutive funding. They had multiple of the deals that we tracked. And then behind Sweden, we have France and Germany, who are also kind of leading the way. And I think this is really, politically, they've been doing a big push for a while, and now we're starting to see technologies mature, and then the governments and banks are able to come into play. When we take a global perspective, again, we see Europe at the top in funding and deal activity. This is not always the case. Usually it's the US, but now with these giga rounds and these companies in Europe scaling, Europe is really starting to take a leading position in climate technology. And I think that's a great sign, and it really is pushing US and North America to also kind of accelerate the growth. That's a little bit even more seen when we look at mega rounds. That's 100 million plus rounds of funding. Traditionally, the US has more advanced capital markets, and there we see lots more funding, over time, larger deals going into companies. But now we're starting to see Europe kind of close that gap. And, for the past kind of 3-4 quarters, Europe has been, right in line with North America. And so that's just a great sign for the European ecosystem. Now, where's all this money going? Climate is a physical problem. We need real on-the-ground solutions. And what we're seeing is physical solutions got 8 times more funding than digital solutions. And at the same time, adoption got 3 times more funding than breakthrough. And so what that means is these mature technologies are getting all this funding to scale, and at the same time, we're still investing in new breakthrough technologies that are needed to get us to net zero. This quarter, we also saw that M&A activity continued to be the main exit activity. We saw no IPOs, maybe one SPAC happening, and the rest is just corporate acquisitions in this space. So this is just a really quick snapshot. This is a really long report. Our team does research for months and months on this. And what else you can see in the report is a little bit more into this product innovation framework, where we're talking about where the money is going between breakthrough and adoption, physical and digital, and where it should be going. And then we also dive deep into all the different challenge areas. So this was very high-level, aggregated stuff, but there's energy, industry, transport, food, and ag, and we go into very much detail into what are the technologies out there, what are the technology readiness levels, and how are they scaling. And so that report is available on our website, netzeroinsights.com. So if you're interested, you can go and download it for more information. Thank you.
It's time to wake up.